There are only four kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need a caregiver. Rosalind Carter.
Welcome to the Simply Retirement Podcast with your host, Eric Blake. I'm Wendy McConnell. I'm wondering why you picked that quote.
You couldn't guess from that quote, could you, that we're going to be talking about caregiving and caregivers and supporting caregivers?
Yes. And, it's not been that long since dear Rosalind
That's right.
has passed on. So we're
Just
here.
a few weeks ago. Absolutely.
We're hearing a lot more about her, which is great because, she just had such a big heart.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I think that, that quote, there's some stats I want to share before we get into the episode too far and bring on our guest. There's some stats I want to share because I think it stresses the importance that actually the caregivers play in our world, but more specifically, just the fact that so many women serve in that role. These stats are actually from caregiver.org. And the first one says that an estimated 66% of caregivers are female. That's number one. Number two, the average caregiver is a 49-year-old woman who works outside the home and provides 20 hours per week of unpaid care. And then the last one is, of course, men play a role in caregiving as well. They provide assistance, but female caregivers may spend as much as 50% more time providing care than male caregivers. And our audience is women who are trying to navigate this retirement journeys. A lot of times they're on their own. A lot of times they're serving in that capacity, and we want to make sure that we bring the resources to the table to make sure that they stay on track. And that's really what this episode's all about. Lili Fiore and I, who is our guest, and I'll bring her on just a second, we were fortunate enough to participate in a virtual caregivers conference organized by another previous guest, Jeannie Doherty. She was back on episode 9, and my focus on the conference was Social Security planning for caregivers. Lili's focus is not only on how to provide the best possible care for your loved one, but how do you do that without losing control of your own life? And in her own words, Lili can help her audience learn how to bring peace, organization, and a sense of control into your life as a caregiver. And that's what I'm hoping she can do today, is help us navigate this caregiving journey in a way that not only helps you maintain your sanity, but hopefully can help you stay on the right path for your own retirement journey. And Lili is the author, and she is an author. She just is, I'm not sure if the book is out yet. We'll talk about the book here in just a bit, but she's the founder of Much Love Lili, where she shares ideas and support for caregivers. So Lili Fiore, welcome to the Simply Retirement Podcast.
Thank you, Eric. I'm thrilled to be here, and I love what you do in supporting women. Thank you for that.
I appreciate that. And, you and I have gotten to know each other a little bit over the last few months. I think we actually connected through Instagram initially.
We did. We
had a chance to chat. I saw a lot of your content being posted, and I really, what you're able to do and some of the resources you're able to bring to the table are just awesome. And that's why I wanted to have you on the podcast. But I think that's maybe a good place to start, is just sharing a little bit about your background, how you got into what you're doing today.
Sure. Well, my dad was an Episcopal priest, and he was head of the pastoral care department at the big hospital where we lived in Vermont. And I was raised with thinking of others always. That was just the way it was in my house, because my dad could be called at any time, even if he was on call, but home, for someone who needed him, someone who was in a personal crisis at the hospital with one of their loved ones. So that was just always the way I was raised to think. And that never changed. And through my family's journey with grandmothers and my beloved Aunt Esther, who I write about in my book, and then my dad and then my mom, I came up with a lot of different systems and had a lot of trials and tribulations in my caregiving journey with them many years ago, because there wasn't a lot of resources out there for me. And I looked and I was working full time, and my husband was a workaholic. And so he did what he could, but, he had his own stuff to do. And I had to, deal with raising my daughter, partially helping with his 2 wonderful stepsons. And it was a lot to juggle everything, especially because Aunt Esther lived in Chicago at the time. So more than once, I had to literally throw clothes in a bag and jump on a plane because she needed me. So I decided, after moving down to North Carolina that I really had a lot of information and resources and had gone through a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that could help other people. And if I can share my journey with people and save them some of the hardships that I went through so that they don't have to experience that, then that makes it all worthwhile, right?
Absolutely. Well, maybe that's in terms of thinking of the resources that you can offer. I think a good place to start also might be just a definition of what is caregiving for you, and or what is a caregiver, who could really benefit from the work that you do.
Well, anyone who has someone in their life who is not well, maybe it's an accident, maybe it's dementia and a cognitive diagnosis, maybe they unfortunately have incurable disease and have been given a certain amount of time to live before they succumb to an illness. And I can help in all of those situations. Many times, especially when we're dealing with a parent or an older relative, there's a lot of friction because it's awkward to turn into the parent for the person that was in a parent role for us. And I can help figure out and decode what's going on with the relationships and help you figure out how to constructively organize things, separate yourself so that you do not take everything personally, and understand where they're coming from, because usually people who are being cared for, very often they become very grumpy and disagreeable because they don't like what's happening with their body or their life, or they don't like the lack of control they have. And that's all very reasonable and normal responses. The problem is if you're the caregiver for that person and you only have a finite amount of time in your life and you're at the end of your rope because you're trying to get your work stuff done, take care of your kids, your spouse, your pets, your house, the list goes on, and whatever you're doing in your community, you have zero patience for that ornery loved one that you're caring for. And so I can help you figure out through a number of very proven tools and things on how to do that. And I have lots of questionnaires and ways that we can help the person be back, feel like they have as much control as possible of their life. Even if they actually don't, there are things we can do and approaches you can make so that they feel good about things, and we can make those step roads and things like that. So,
well, and like I said, we'll talk a little bit more about the book here in a little bit, but one of the most fascinating things that I pulled in going through the information was where you talked about how important planning is. And actually, being a financial advisor, being a financial planner, we always talk about planning. If you're going to have a successful retirement, it's going to take planning. It can't just be, we're just going to hopefully throw a dart and see what sticks. We got to have a plan. So if you can help us understand, why is planning also such an important part of caregiving?
Well, planning, if you're planning ahead as much as you can, understood. If somebody falls and breaks a hip, then there's nothing you can do. You've got to deal with it, and it's real time. But what we can do is, if you look at the whole situation, figure out how many people in your life might end up falling into your lap as people you've got to be responsible for. Maybe you're their chosen power of attorney for financial things. Maybe you're their medical power of attorney for medical decisions. Try to figure that out. If you're in your early 40s, take a look at that. Look at your radar and figure out who is in that net, and then work with them now. Hey, have you thought about aging? What are you going to do? And do you have your legal documents taken care of? Do you have your advance directives? Do you have your, power of attorneys taken care of? And if you don't, let's talk about getting that done, and let me help you. But you have to do it in a way that's not confrontational, because nobody likes to be told what to do, right? So you can broach the subject with saying, hey, I'm getting my paperwork in order, and I was wondering if you've got your paperwork in order, because I really want to make sure that somebody knows what your wishes are for everything. And you can broach it that way, and that will alleviate so much of the difficulty, because you know what they want. You know, if they already want to live in a certain retirement, you know, community and move there eventually. And or if they don't and they want to stay at home, you also need to know if they have long-term care insurance, or if they have a life insurance policy that converts into long-term care coverage for if they have an accident or something else. I also think it makes sense to look at your family history. Is there Parkinson's on both sides of your family like there is mine? You know, I did the 23andMe. I don't have the gene, but I could still get it from other ways, right? They don't test
Right.
for all the genes, but at least I know, you know, a little bit. So I think it's really important if you can look at all those things and try to plan ahead. If you can get your loved one into one of these wonderful communities that has all 4 stages, so where they can live independently, they can move to assisted living when they no longer can live independently, and then there's a nursing wing for when they decline to the point where they can't be cared, they can't live at home or in the assisted living part. That's a great setup. My grandparents did that. And it was wonderful because nobody ever had to make these decisions for them. They chose, they made the decision.
Well, that's one of the things I would encourage our audience to do is you might go back and listen to some of our past episodes on these exact type of topics. You know, go back to episode 10, 11, 12, and like I said, yeah, those are probably the key ones, maybe even 13, where we talk about different living arrangements for seniors. So as you're making that transition, how do you number one, how do you sell your house? What are some of your options for getting out of that house, especially if there is some healthcare issues or some immediate concerns? And home care, how does home care work? How can you stay in your home as long as possible? I think one of the things, though, would be maybe valuable for you to share is having those conversations can be really difficult.
It can.
Depending on the relationship, of course. But bringing up some of these topics, in many cases, on either side, they're
It's
not
not
willing to
fun.
bring it up. So, are there
Right.
any additional thoughts or cues or things that you would suggest that people can use to try to get over that hurdle?
Yeah, first of all, I would set aside some time, right? So say, hey, mom, if you live out of town, just say, hey, I really want to talk to you. Can we do a Zoom call? And if they're not tech savvy and they don't do Zoom, then can we talk on the phone? And make a date with them, and then put all the technology away so you do not get distracted. Make sure no one's going to come running into your house. Make sure the kids are set, so that you can really focus on your loved one. And then give them a heads up. Just say, hey, there's some serious stuff that that isn't fun to talk about, but I really want to talk about it with you because I love you. And I want to make sure that we honor all of your wishes. And so I need to understand what your wishes are, because we never talk about this stuff because it's not fun. And I know it's not fun, but let's talk about it, because I don't want us to do anything that you wouldn't have wanted. And we need to know what you want to make sure that happens. I think that's really important. And if they're grumpy and they don't answer, I mean, then you just keep working on them until they are. And if that doesn't work and too much time has passed, then I suggest getting some siblings or some other relatives and going in and doing a loving intervention and saying, hey, we really need to get this figured out. Because if we don't, then that leaves everything up in the air, and that's not right. That's not fair to you. We need to know what you want to do.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about is, once you've gotten to that point and you are in a situation where you are now serving as a caregiver, you're playing an important role, just the day-to-day can become extremely stressful. It can be very
Yes.
challenging. Are there maybe 2 or 3 things that you would say, hey, on a daily basis, think about doing this just to keep your sanity, just keep yourself on the right path? Because again, it's just a difficult situation.
It's a really difficult situation. The number one thing I love, and both the priority planner that I created for caregivers as well as my book start off with Don Miguel Ruiz's The 4 Agreements. And
Right.
the 4 agreements are: be impeccable with your word, don't take anything personally, don't make assumptions, and always do your best. So if you live by those 4 tenets, then you will have a much better journey as a caregiver. You can't take anything personally. That is paramount. They're going to be grumpy. They know you love them no matter what. So if they're going to be bitchy, they're going to be bitchy to you because they know it's safe, right? They know that their feelings are safe. Is it fair to you? No, but that's the reality. You know, if you've got an enlightened loved one that you're caring for, then celebrate them and celebrate how easy they are to take care of. That's wonderful, but that's not necessarily what everybody has. So it's really hard, especially when you're hiring caregivers to bring into the house. A lot of older people will fire them. My mother fired people, my aunt fired people for no real reason. So you expect to go through that, expect that they're going to definitely resist and that it's going to be hard. And if you assume that it's going to be hard and it isn't, then well, wonderful. But don't think it's going to be easy, because it's not, because you're asking them to change who they've been for how many decades. And nobody likes having strangers in their home. My book has How to Hire a Caregiver in it. It has something I call my sensory care method, which does an evaluation of all your four senses, or your five senses, sorry, and a sense of fulfillment on top of that. And if you go through that with your loved one, first physically assess what works and what doesn't. Can they still taste sweet things and sour things? Maybe they can't, and we don't even think about that, right? So do the full inventory with them, then go through and find out what they like. Their tastes may have changed over the years, and it's really important to check in with them and figure out who they are now. One of my favorite stories is how my grandmother used to answer for my grandfather. If somebody said, "Hey, Carlton, what do you want in your coffee?" Martha would answer, "Oh, he'll take 2 creams and a sugar," right? But maybe Carlton didn't like 2 creams and a sugar after 50 years of marriage. Maybe he didn't want sugar in his coffee anymore, but she didn't give him the opportunity because she thought she knew him. And maybe she did, but maybe she didn't. And we all are guilty of doing the same things with our loved ones. Just because they've always liked something doesn't mean they like it now, especially if they've been chronically ill or have something like cancer. Many of those treatments, many chemo treatments, change taste buds. COVID changes taste buds.
Right.
So something that it may have been a favorite for them before no longer resonates with them. So you need to pay attention to that. And my book is full of tips. Surround them with the things that they love, the colors that they love, the posters that they love. If they're a baseball fanatic, then make sure that they always have a baseball game playing on in the background. It probably doesn't matter if it's a 20-year-old or a 10-year-old baseball game. They're just hearing, "Oh yeah, he got on first. Yay,"
Yeah.
That's what matters, right? Surround people with things that they love, because that usually cues back to their childhood somewhere, or to some time in their life that was comforting, brings security to them, and they will be less ornery because they will feel more secure and more stable and more loved.
Well, that's what I wanted to talk about, the book, because when I went through it, you provided a copy to me and I had a chance to go through it. And this is, we keep talking about it like it's a book, but to me, this is like a manual. This is like a how-to guide. This is not just a here's what my life as a caregiver was like. You actually give actionable steps, worksheets, some things I would have never thought of. So can you talk a little bit about the book? Number one, when is it going to be available? Depending on when this episode gets released, of course. But...
Yeah, it's due to be available by the end of 2023. So
excellent. Okay.
So it will definitely be available by 2024 in January.
But yeah, just share a few of the things, just like maybe some examples of things that people wouldn't think about. Again, some of these guides and checklists and things that you've got in there are just amazing.
Oh, thank you. Well, I've got How to Hire a Caregiver, things to look for when you're looking at nursing homes. One of the things I always tell people when they're going and looking at nursing homes is, aside from the smell test, right? You never want to put your loved one in a nursing home that smells bad because they are understaffed and not keeping on top of their laundry. But look at the staff. Are they fighting between each other? Are they grumpy with each other? Or are they a team and working together to get things done? You want to go to put your loved one in a place that has a good, solid dynamic between their staff, where they're helping each other in a real team. That's very important. There's lots and lots and lots of personal care tracking sheets, medical care tracking sheets, because the key to being on top of your loved one's care is to have a 3-ring binder and have the sheets that are applicable to your loved one in that binder with a pen that's always available, and backup sheets and backup pens, so that any caregivers there can write their vital signs, can write down how often they have pain. They can write down if there's a wrong word being used, and write down conversations. Is your loved one talking about someone who died a number of years ago? Well, if they're talking about that person a lot, it's important to know that, because they may be transitioning sooner than you think they are. And never doubt that they're seeing the people that they say they're seeing. Yes, there are sometimes people have hallucinations, but more often than not, they're actually seeing things. So just be aware and understand. Another thing that happens is very often people, when they're getting close to dying, they'll talk about wanting to go home. And very often I have friends that have said, oh, my mom kept saying she wanted to go home, and I kept telling her she was home. And what I explained to my friend is, no, honey, they're not talking about their physical home. They're talking about going home to God. So say, yes, you're going home soon. If they talk about going on a trip, say, yes, you're going on your trip. Your transportation's already taken care of. They're going to pick you up. You don't need to worry, because sometimes people start to ruminate, oh, I'm going on this trip, but I don't know how I'm going to get there. Tell them not to worry,
Right. And that's one of the things, again, as I've talked about a little bit on some of the other past episodes, is, we're dealing with a lot of these things with my grandmother, who we're very
Yes.
fortunate to be alive still. But we see some of these things. Some of the challenges she'll have with remembering things. Again, it's amazing that the things she can recall from way several years ago, but then actually the challenges on just the minute to minute, forgetting something that she may have said the last hour.
Right.
Now, one of the things that we actually are fortunate enough that we have some very good caregivers who come into our home. But I wanted to touch on that because you actually had a great post on Instagram, just I think it was in the last couple of weeks or so, about that exact topic, hiring a caregiver.
Yes.
And the point of the post was that in order to keep your loved one at home as long as possible, you are most likely going to have more help. So can you help us understand a little bit more about why that's so important, and maybe some of the key factors that we need to think about or to consider when looking to bring someone in to help take care of our loved one?
Sure. The number one thing I always tell everybody is, even if you only need someone one morning a week, and you have found someone or have heard of someone who can come in and do that one morning a week or 4 mornings a week, you need to fill out the paperwork and get set with 4 different care agencies. Because as things progress, unless they move to a nursing home, you're going to want to have vast resources, because I promise you, if you know your loved one can't be home alone during certain times of the day, or they get to the point where they can't be alone at all, but they're still at home, you don't want to mess up and not have backup. You need 4 deep backup for caregivers. People will call out sick. They will call out. If your loved one is grumpy and mean to them, they will call out because they don't want to deal with your loved one. So you need to have those relationships started. You don't have to give any money to these companies when you sign the contracts. You just have to set up and get the paperwork done so that they're there and you can use them when you need them. Now, make sure when you look at the different agencies, find out what's included in their care with their CNAs. Will they go on walks? Will they do dishes? Will they do housekeeping? Find out specifically what each company is willing to give for the dollar rate, and then hire the 4 companies that give you the most bang for your buck. That's really important. Find out who can give you care on a very short notice. Like if somebody, and ask all of these people this, the care managers that you get assigned to. If I call you at 5 o'clock and tell you that somebody called out, can you try to give me a caregiver? Do you have after hours phone calls if the person that's supposed to be there overnight calls in and says their car broke down on the way at 11 p.m.? Do you have someone you can call to come and do the night shift? And if they don't have that, then you want to look elsewhere, right? Because you want to get the most equipped caregivers, because this is your time and your energy that you're talking about. if you can't get the resources you need through the caregiving agencies, you're going to most likely be the person that ends up going there to cover the shift,
Right.
or somebody else in your family. And that is never fun when you had plans. So it's really good to do that. Also, I really believe in boundaries. Do not, as much as you love the caregiver, do not take them into the breast of your family and treat them completely as a family member. What can happen, doesn't always, but can happen, is that if the caregiver experiences a financial problem in their life, then they may mention it to your loved one, and your loved one may feel challenged or upset or awkward that they're not helping this person out of this financial difficulty. So you don't want to go there. So you want to keep that boundary up and keep it professional. You can appreciate them. You can give them gifts at Christmas. You can nominate them for Caregiver of the Month with their agency and support them that way, and be enthusiastic and write them great reviews and recommend them to other people if they're not working full time for you, so that they are working full time if that's what they want. But do not get too close.
Right. Now, we already talked about your book being, basically, again, a user's manual
It is.
for caregivers. But are there maybe 2 or 3 other resources that you might suggest, websites or other books or things like that, that you would suggest caregivers look into?
Sure. Well, on my website, I have a huge resource section, which is growing exponentially. And I have things about life after death there. I have alternative healing. I have things about angels. All these things come up when we have someone we love that's dying. And so I try to have vetted resources on my website for anything and everything I can think of. And I'm adding more resources all the time. And I'm going to have a huge caregiving resource section as well. So there'll be more resources there. There are national resources for caregiving in my national resources section. Okay. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up is that there's also a lot about getting ready for death, and also for everything that is going on after your loved one dies. The biggest thing that I hear and have experienced myself is when your loved one dies, everybody's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'd love to help you. Let me know, right? They always say, let me know. Well, baloney. You don't need to let them know. You're the one who lost someone. So there's 4 or 5 sheets that have all the different tasks that come up when your loved one dies. And there's a place under each one for the names and phone numbers and emails. So if somebody says they want to help, say, great, pick something. And there's one for the day of the funeral as well. Who's going to pick up Mrs. Smith, who doesn't drive anymore, but wants to go to the funeral, right? Things like that. So there's a lot of things like that. And then the last chapter has grief and different things about grief and different way people grieve, and the different circumstances and how it can be challenging.
And where will people be able to find your book when it does come out?
It'll be on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Hay House, Balboa's online. It'll be on. Sorry, I'll start again. It'll be on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Balboa Press, and Hay House.
Perfect. And how else can our audience connect with you or learn more about what you do, the services that you offer?
All they have to do is go to muchlovelili.com or email me at Lili, and Lili spelled Lili, because I'm named after my great grandma. So just email me at lili@muchlovelili.com, and you can get me anytime. I answer all my own mail. I'm here to help, and I have lots of different packages. I can do some consulting and help you get set up with your loved one. I can do some crisis management if that's needed. I also have packages where you've got access to me around the clock, because guess what? Caregiving doesn't stop just because it's bedtime. So I'm available to people if they need me at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. That's fine, because I've been there and I know what it's like to need someone at that time. So not an issue.
Right. And we'll make sure that we have all the information that Lili just shared in the show notes and the summary of the episode. Thank you so much for joining us today, Lili. If you are currently a caregiver or you expect that you will be in the future, please do connect with Lili, get a copy of her book, review the resources that she's talked about that are on her website. She's an absolutely amazing resource. If you'd be interested in learning more about us at Blake Wealth Management, please go to our website, blakewealthmanagement.com. There you can listen to past episodes. You can sign up for our weekly Simply Retirement newsletter. And if you're a woman that is less than 5 years from retirement and you have questions about how to optimize your Social Security, minimizing lifetime tax liability, or investing smarter, just click that Start Here button on the website to learn more about our process for helping you make an educated and informed decision about whether we are the right firm to help you on your retirement journey. And I did wanted to finish with a quote from Lili's book, taking Care of You chapter. And she said, "I want you to remember this. You are human and you have limits. This isn't about blaming or not being strong enough or good enough. It is about taking care of yourself so you can take care of those depending on you. There are also a lot of people who love you very much. And even if they don't know how to express it or show it, you do not want to be one of those roughly 30% that literally die trying to take care of their loved one and everyone and everything else but themselves."
Well, thank you guys. Thank you both for being here. And thank you for listening today. Please like, follow, and share this podcast with your friends. Until next time, I'm Wendy McConnell.